Fine. All right, Michael, we're back. Future Talks. Yeah, man. Curious to hear your thoughts on a few different things. I guess you're just saying today's a big day with Apple Vision Pro coming out. We'll talk a little Morpheus and then maybe a little stenography. But yeah, just you know more than I do. So tell me about Vision Pro. It's out today, available for consumer purchase. What have you been seeing in the news, the unboxings, all that?
Yeah, it's been I guess they announced this last summer, but Tuesday was the day that all of the reviewers were able to share their like unboxing videos.
Hmm.
And so you got to see like what's his name?
I was just
MKBHD.
thinking, what's the acronym? Yeah, I forget. We
Yeah,
just jumped right past it. That guy. Yeah.
that guy. So he like the people like him are making like 50-minute review videos, and they're all kind of similar. And they basically just like unbox it and click through the apps. Like they're all very similar. And everyone's like both amazed at it and kind of like unsure what to do with it,
Hmm.
you know?
That's really interesting.
Because it's not like a VR gaming headset. Like I could get a Quest 3 for $300. And it's very clear what I would do. I could play ping pong, I could play games on it, and it's like, oh, I use it just for that. But the Vision Pro like does kind of like everything, right?
Hmm.
It's like you can use it for your Mac replacement, for your TV replacement. You can have weather widgets on your wall. Like it does everything to the point where it's like, okay, well, are you going to wear it all day now?
Hmm.
And it's as good as it is. It's not something that you probably want to wear for like, more than 3 hours, 4 hours.
Yeah, yeah, totally. That's interesting. It's like it's almost like the paradox of choice. There's just so many options of what to do with it, but then you end up doing nothing with it. Perhaps I don't know. Like
Yeah.
I'm trying to think I remember last summer when all the initial videos came out. I'm sure we talked about it even then, but there was, watching whatever film, and the sound's incredible and the image is incredible. So I guess, if I knowing very little about it, if I just had to sit here and guess how will people actually use it, and then curious what your reaction is to this, but I'd say, maybe not gaming, maybe there are some games. I don't know how many games are in the new Vision Pro App Store, but watching films and watching shows, although imagine if they're expensive. So unless your significant other or family members or whatever roommates have them too, you're kind of isolated watching that entertainment. To picture people really using it in like a productivity way, like as a workstation, feels like a stretch to me right now. I imagine that it's probably really good for like what we're doing right now. Like if you're in a Zoom environment, I'm guessing it's a solo thing wherever you're sitting, and so being in Vision Pro might be really great for that. Do I sort of have that read right, or like what are the actual use cases? It can do everything, but what are people actually most excited to use it for?
Yeah. I was talking to my friend, we co-founded a VR company together, and he was saying like, yeah, I think it'll be a really sick TV. And
That's
most people are going to do that. It's like I want the 150-inch TV in my living room. You
yeah.
can link it up with Apple AirPlay, right? So you can be like your, girlfriend can be watching something on the TV, and it's synchronous. Um, I don't know, something about that to me that feels like the worst possible use case of VR. And I could be wrong in this, but it's like to just kind of like if you watch all the marketing videos, it's like a guy sitting on a couch alone, just like in blissful entertainment.
Yeah.
And like your eyes are just like very symbolically like, you know, uh blind to the world, and it's like replaced by a company. Like it just like kind of feels too consumerist to me, to use it for that use case.
Yeah. It's also not, it's not a 0 to 1 thing, right? It's just slightly better, or maybe way better. I don't know, but it's just an improvement on this existing thing. It's nothing like net new. I do think there's some visceral thing about just the visual of it. Like there's that famous photo of Zuck walking down an aisle in a theater. I think he's doing a keynote or something, and everybody's wearing them.
Yeah.
This woman on Twitter, Kyla Scanlon, had a pretty viral tweet. It was written like stream of consciousness, just like a few sentences. There's some Yahoo News or some article where like a woman's like wearing it, and some of the marketing they'll have it at least like it'll be like clear. Like I remember one of the ads, the guy could like see his kids or whatever. But this one it was not clear, it was opaque, and it was over this woman's face, and she's like smiling, the woman's smiling. But Kyla's tweet was like, "I know this is the next big thing, and it's going to change the world, and it's all this stuff, but." Something just deep inside me, this just doesn't sit well, and it really resonated with a lot of people. And I find myself being like, Yeah, like for sure. I feel that way too. Now, is this the thing where technology that's invented when you're a kid feels natural, and then when you're older, it feels all bad? I don't know, but um, we're going to talk about Morpheus in a sec, and that gets closer to like brain computer interface. That one too, I kind of like seize up and feel uncomfortable. But even this Apple Pro, it's not nearly as crazy or invasive as like Neuralink type stuff, and yet there's some visceral hesitation that I feel when I see it or think about it. I don't know. You think that's pretty fundamental, or you think we'll get over that?
I think there's two angles. One is that if you looked at cell phones in the 90s and how big they were, like something felt wrong about that. You look at someone using a PC in the 70s, they're like hunched over in front of this big machine in their living
Yep,
room.
yep,
And like
yep.
those are very like non-appealing scenes. And if you compare it to the glasses, right? I haven't put them on yet, but the Meta 2 glasses have been
Yeah,
really nice.
yeah,
Uh, like when they look like that, I think no one, people won't have the concern because you can actually see the eyes.
right,
But
right.
to actually make that a good experience is such a harder like science problem that we're still a decade at least away from.
Wow, that long you
getting
think?
the
Okay.
vision. Yeah, I mean, I think what will probably happen is they'll make the Vision Pro smaller, like a pair of steampunk goggles. I
Hmm.
think that's maybe 3 to 5 years away, but
Hmm.
to actually make it a pair of glasses that can go fully immersive, like that might not even be possible.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, you see like a Black Mirror episode or something. It's like a contact lens, and you figure, okay, maybe it eventually get to that point. It's an interesting point comparing it to past technologies, because it's like I was actually in the Bay Area a couple weeks ago. I went to this. I didn't tell you. I went to this U.S. China Future of U.S. China Relationship Conference, but it was held just by chance at the, I think it's the Museum of Computers or something, like in Mountain View. And so I walked through after, the conference, and just saw all the old, the original Macintosh, and the old, I forget what they're even called, eMac, or like these huge
Yeah.
IBM in the
I
50s.
went there too. That was sick.
Yeah, so you've seen it. It's
Yeah.
really cool. And it's so hard from 2024 to look back on something from 1984 or whatever year, and it looks so old and clunky and shitty, and it's impossible to not see it. It was very difficult to not see it that way. It's very hard to like step back into time and think, wow, this clunky beige bucket of bolts that looks so ancient was the cutting edge thing. Of course, that's how it always is, though. And then it's equally hard to like project in the future and say, okay, this sleek Vision Pro that seems so exciting, everybody's lining up at the Apple Store, here in Santa Monica to go buy one, is going to be just as clunky as that Apple II. So I know it is on a certain level. I know it is, but it's hard to like really believe that and accept that. But I guess, yeah, it'll just naturally become more sleek, less bulky, and maybe it hits some intersection where it feels more human and yet still has all the amazing features, and that'll become really adopted. But I don't know if this can be widely. Do you think this will be widely adopted, despite this visceral like opposition a lot of people feel? Do you think it'll take off, or I
I
don't know
think
if you
it's
support?
doing better than people thought.
Okay.
Like, I think they increased the estimates for their sales this year.
Hmm.
I also think that this is the Pro line at 3,500, and they're trying to build demand for something people want but they can't afford. And I
Hmm.
think Vision 2, they're going to have the Vision Pro and the Vision, which will be 2,000. And I think that's going to sell millions of units. And then like version 3 could be mainstream.
Interesting.
That'd be my guess.
So
Yeah.
so it builds hype. You watch the videos. You're not going to shell out. What's the price point? 3,500 or 4,000?
3,500 for the base model, not including all the add-ons you probably want. So it's closer to like a 5K purchase.
Lots of people are priced out at that price point. So then
Yeah.
you don't buy a 5K, but that's really interesting. It just makes people,
It's the
really
psychology of a deal, because then when you can get it for 2,000, it's like
for it.
definitely.
Yeah, I have no doubt they know what they're doing from the pricing and business standpoint. I don't know. I just obviously there's what at this point 8 or 10 years ago, the Google glasses and the Snap had their glasses and all those, and those totally failed. They were just too early. But yeah, okay, interesting. So we'll see how this one goes. What do you think in terms of like taking Zoom meetings or the productivity stuff I was talking about? Like, do you agree that it might be good for a Zoom meeting type of thing? I'm trying to imagine a world in which these were ubiquitous, and you had every rite of passage student wearing one of these. Like that maybe would have been a possibility or something. But yeah, I don't know. Like, how do you think on the not entertainment, but the productivity side, how widely will it be accepted and used?
Yeah, I mean, so you can basically, with the headset on, you can look at your Mac, and then above it, there'll be a little button. You can click it, and it'll say turn to VR. And then
Mm.
your monitor pops up, and it's an infinitely scalable thing. And then you can also take any other Vision apps or even iPad apps and arrange them around your space. Um, or on your whole apartment, right? Like I could put weather widgets by the front door. I could put cooking widgets in the kitchen,
Mm.
calendar here, my writing stuff there, my music stuff there.
Mhm.
So um, I think the question though is like when you think of productivity, it's like I'm using it for the workday. Um, and it's like, okay, it's an 8 hour day. Like, am I gonna be wearing this for 8 hours? I think that question comes back. For a Zoom call, like maybe. And they do have these avatars, right? So you can take off the thing and aim it at your head and like look
Mm.
in every direction, and it creates like a B grade version of yourself, right? If
Jeez.
Lex and Zuck were version A, and
Yeah.
like the meta like Zuckerberg meme, that's like an F. These are like a B. Like it's
Wow.
passable, you know?
Not bad. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Right. But at the end of the day, it comes down to, yeah, just the physiology. Like another joke people were making on Twitter was it was, pressing up against this woman's face, and it's like some meme about, parents like don't stare at the TV too long, it's bad for your eyes. And then now it's like just like plaster on your face. And I don't know, have you heard of that? Like, there's all the dizziness thing. I'm sure they've like thought of these things and try to rectify them, but like, how do you think just the body responds to being in one of
Yeah.
these?
Dizziness won't be an issue. Dizziness comes from bad VR software. I mean, I guess developers could make bad software,
Yeah.
but it comes when you're in a video game and you're using like the joystick to move forward and
Mm,
your body's not actually walking. In
mm,
VR, that makes you incredibly sick.
mm.
So that's why it's better if you're in a VR game to like teleport, because you kind of just like blink out and blink in,
Got it.
and there's no like motion simulation.
Got it. Got
Um, the other problem with Zoom fatigue is like you're staring at a fixed screen at a fixed distance for 3 to 4 hours of meetings in a row, and it comes from the eye not changing its
it.
focal distance. So
Mm.
they say like every 20 minutes you should look away 20 feet away for 20 seconds
I've heard
to
this.
like
Mom tells me
yeah.
this. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think even though it's right up against your face, like it is spatial, so
Mm.
it might actually be easier on your eyes.
That's
But
interesting.
but the light is a problem, right? Like the
Yeah.
new iPad has a feature where if you're holding it too close to your face, it actually warns you and tells you to hold it further away. And then
Mm.
right after they announced that feature, they introduced the Vision Pro, which is like
It's
a
ironic.
huge oversight. But
Yeah.
yeah, they haven't addressed it either, so it's a little concerning.
Yeah, that seems like it could be an issue. On the flip side, something that's really interesting, not a problem, is like I saw somewhere on Twitter, there's this floor that like you can walk and it's almost like a treadmill in all directions. You've seen this? Like that was pretty
Yeah,
cool. I was like, okay,
that's crazy.
that explains a lot about how you could be really playing a game in VR and really into it and not running into the walls and all. That was pretty interesting. Maybe that'll become standard.
Yeah.
Hmm.
It's kind of like that almost blew my mind as much as the Vision Pro, because my cousin at some point, this was like 2017, he ordered a treadmill, right, to do that same thing. And
Wow.
he had to cancel the order because you needed a concrete floor that could support like a 1,000 point load in order to have it. And he was on like the second floor of an apartment. So he had
Ah,
to cancel it. And to have that as a little fabric, that just
yeah.
makes it feasible that you can walk through a virtual environment. And I mean, VR is still very, very new. Like I've been looking into the history of a typewriter,
Hmm.
and the modern typewriter was invented like 1873, but there were like probably 50 years of attempts before that.
Yeah.
And then from the mature version we knew, it lasted until 2011. That's when they shut down the last factory.
Hmm.
Um, so in that period of 140 years, it kind of was in this mature form, and then technology eventually escalated, and now it's extinct, you know? But like we're basically only 10 years into that whole paradigm. This might even be the beginning of the paradigm for all we know.
I mean, a lot of
Um,
ways it feels like it is. Yeah. Yeah.
and what's crazy to me is that if you think about someone in 1942, they're just so used to typewriters, they could never imagine that the thing would be obsolete.
Hmm.
And that's kind of like someone today in 2020 who's using TVs and phones and laptops, and they're just like, oh, this is all totally normal, and the VR is so weird. But it's like that's like by the end of this century, everything we know today as technologically normal could be extinct because we have, microfibers on our floor that work as treadmills. We have contacts and glasses, and it's like kind of unimaginable, but it's just very in line with what's already happened.
Well, I would also just say it's not could be extinct. It will be. It will be. It's very hard to believe this in the present, but
Yeah.
it absolutely will be. I'm always interested. You've probably seen these too on YouTube, on Twitter. You'll see these accounts share videos of a 1960 rendition of what they think the future will look like. And certain things like they're really tracking on, like they're even today, I think I saw a comic from like, or no, this week I saw a comic from like the 1890s, imagining a video teleconferencing. And of course, it was like the old phone and the image was like sort of projected onto a wall. But these ones from like the 1950s and 60s, it's like they do say, here's a terminal, you know, it talks in the old weird, funny voice, a terminal where, you know, Mr. whatever sits in conferences with Japan. But it's the thing that's always interesting is that all the materials, all the aesthetics are all just stuck in 1960 because like they can imagine the concept of what could exist, but the like material reality of those things are unimaginable, like literally unimaginable. Like it was, you know, impossible to conceive of. They didn't even have a PC, so how could they conceive of like a MacBook Pro or a, you know, a phone? Of course. Now, I guess some people would have like an imaginative device where you could video conference, but even the aesthetics are always going to be different. So the stuff we have today will absolutely be obsolete. I mean, the fun task to sit here and try to talk about is like, okay, what would the next thing look like? And I don't know. I wonder how, if it's like, this has become so integrated in your environment where your entire living quarters becomes like a smart environment where you can walk.
Exactly.
And you like, that's right. Well, two things. One, I was thinking about like, if you have like a place you could go to, I don't know if this has become more common, but like a place you can rent out a space. It's like it's almost like an internet cafe for VR. It's like an environment specifically designed to be VR friendly, where there's cushions and there's that infinite floor and so maybe that'll be a thing. And or maybe it'll become your entire home environment becomes designed around these things. But then it's like, how, you know, you're not going to spend all your time in it. Maybe some people will, but then your home environment is catered towards this. But how do you also cater towards like a normal living experience when you're not in VR? So anyway, maybe everybody has a VR room in their house. I don't know. Like it's just it's fun to speculate. It's impossible to know.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, the glasses I have been really like they are functional in the sense where it's like I have a lot of great footage from my vacation in Greece that I wouldn't have gotten if I had just used my phone. So they're immediately useful, but I'm also getting that preview of what it might be like in 10 years when everyone has this powerful headset. And it's like, oh, I sometimes I wear it all day. Sometimes I don't put it on for a while, but if I need to, right? Like in the course of this sentence, I can just basically put these on right now and
Yep.
like they're on. You know what I
Yep.
mean? And so as easy as that was, like if you had that same thing, you could effectively just show up in my room. And instead of like
Crazy.
simulating our living rooms through Zoom, it's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
we're just totally bridging distances and our operating systems also aren't separate. It's like we could have screens and we can pull up the Morpheus video and just put it right in front of us, you know?
Yeah. Geez.
Um,
See, one thing that's interesting, on one hand, that seems like crazy, but actually in many ways, the crazier leap is that we can just do this itself, like video, you know what I mean? Like I'm in a sense in your space and vice versa. I mean, does that make sense? Like in the eyes of someone who for none of this stuff exists, us just even doing this is remarkable. I remember it's probably 2007 was the first time I saw somebody on a Skype call, which seems so just like antiquated right at this point, but that's not that long. I mean, 16, 17 years ago. And that I was at a science project at a girl's house and her dad was talking to his dad on Skype. And I was like, it just really struck me like, wow, that's pretty wild. And so in some ways it is just an extension of sort of the miraculous and yet mundane thing that we're doing right now.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like it started with letters, and like imagine how weird the first ever letter sent across an ocean must have felt. You know,
That's fascinating. Yep.
it's like I haven't read Kevin Kelly's book called I forget what it's called. It's about these like inevitable forces that shape technology, and it's like it's not even about shaping technology. You just figure out the forces.
Yeah.
And I feel like one of them is just collapsing distance.
Yeah.
Which is different than collapsing time. Like the internet kind of does both, but like the ultimate collapser of distance would be teleportation, where it's like, oh, you can just think of where you want to go and you can go there. And that's obviously a really hard like science problem that might never be solved. But the whole idea is through a simulation layer, which VR is the first version of it. If everyone does, whoever opts into that layer, they can do that teleportation.
Another interesting way to think about this, that's a step towards teleportation. Another interesting way to think about this, there's the skeuomorphic thing where like we always inevitably a new medium or tool or whatever comes along, and our minds, our creative imagination actually can't keep pace with the technological change, right? So the first movie theaters come along and like all the movies are basically like plays, and then you have, you know, the Citizen Kane, like, okay, shoot, there's actually a whole new way to think about this in 3 dimensions. And, you know, there's the images, like the skeuomorphic images on the first iPhone or whatever. And so I wonder, like, isn't watching TV like a skeuomorphic use of VR? Like, it's just like, oh, just TV and VR. And like, what are the new, what's that third dimension? What's the Citizen Kane, you know, shot through the window equivalent of
Yeah.
an Apple Vision Pro? Maybe people probably already thought of this, but I don't.
They have this on the Pro, a little bit of it. One example I saw was it was like an F1 kind of race,
Yeah,
and you saw the screen in front of you, and then you saw the track on the table. You actually see the cars on the table racing.
that's
You can imagine that with football, with baseball. You would like the basketball app that's out. It's the NBA has an app, and you can basically have a big screen of one game, and then you can have up to 5 games playing at once
wow.
with all of the scores in the league. So if you're like playing fantasy basketball or betting or whatever, it's like you can, unlike a TV, you can have like a command room type of view of the whole
Yeah.
league happening at once.
Now that's really interesting. It meant, yeah, like a Vegas casino have all the screens up at once. That's really cool. The other one, yeah, the stuff on the table is fascinating. Imagine like, you know, during commercial breaks, you can just replay all the plays that just happened, and they call it the all 22. You can see all 22 players in the field. And that's really exciting. That's really neat. Goodness. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's just scratching the surface, obviously. Like just the stuff that'll be possible, gaming, entertainment. Man, I just got to take some time to really, it's not, and it's nice just to really stare at this and think about it, because the mind starts to go wild when you really imagine what could be out there.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm I'm trying to, I don't know. I'm telling myself I'm not going to get it. And then the closer I get to it, I'm thinking like, yeah, I'm going to get it, but
Once you try
I
it,
really
you
shouldn't.
bring it.
Yeah, once I try it, I'm defenseless. But I, like we're saying, I think it's about defining how you're going to use it. And for me, like the opposite of just like watching TV through it, it would be like creating things through it.
Yeah.
And I have like 3 desks in this office. And so I'm thinking like, oh, that desk there with the typewriter, that can be where I write. So I
Hmm.
would be like, imagine if I only use the Vision Pro for writing. And the whole idea is like whether when I'm writing essays, I do it in VR. Maybe
Hmm.
there's some advantage of, I can set my whole background to Joshua Tree, and then I can have an AI powered note system over here on the left, and then I
Hmm.
can have other guidelines pinned up. Like I'm just wondering, can I craft a writing studio in VR that makes me write better?
See, that's so interesting
And
because
that's just like an immediate payoff.
yeah, it's so not a like, it's so uniquely tailored to you. Like the number of potential Apple Vision Pro consumers versus the ones who want to like have a designed writing environment, it's such a small percentage. But for you, knowing what you value, it's like perfect, right? It's so valuable to potentially have that. Uh, like for me, it might be okay, now like GPT, I've used it a little bit. Like you can put GPT into Chinese and then do like the Scarlett Johansson voice, whatever, the Chinese equivalent. So what if I like had a VR environment where I could just talk to people? It's like these avatars who speak this language. Like the language learning application there is incredibly exciting, of course. So it's like you can then that's what naturally happens. It takes a little while, but you have this incredible new, you know, tool, and then there's these affordances made possible by the tool that can be really niche, and then yours and mine or whatever, people just have to go out and plunge ahead and explore those. But yeah.
It's the whole frontier because it's using AR kit and just like normal Apple development tools. And so whether developers are making it or you can make stuff for yourself on this thing, like you can make windows, you can make volumes, or you can make immersive experiences. And it's really limitless. And all of the Vision Pro reviews, like, didn't touch that. It's just like very, very basic, like what's out of the box.
Well, they're going lowest common denominator. People want to hear about TV and game
Exactly.
stuff versus like Zoom calls
Yeah.
versus more. There's so many
Yeah.
niche ones that we can't even think of right now that are just like, oh my
A
gosh.
great one was music. What I saw, I mean, they have piano apps where it's like Guitar Hero, where it's showing the notes coming onto your actual piano, so you can learn the songs. Same with guitar, you have to be playing a real guitar, and it's actually showing the shapes right in front of you.
Yeah, that's the type of stuff, like the tutoring, learning type of stuff is so much that could, and God, it's gonna just, there's so many like current things that'll be made obsolete. The adoption will take a while, years, but yeah, wow, it's fascinating. Well, we got about 15 minutes. Maybe we talk Morpheus a bit. It's probably not enough time to give it a full proper treatment, but this, so you sent me this video. You want to explain it? You want to set it up? I watched it this morning. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, it came out like 2 weeks ago, and it is a pretty innocent looking headband.
It is.
And they're calling it an ultrasonic transformer. And it's basically something you put on when you go to sleep, and it helps you spark a lucid dream and then stay inside of it, which
Mm,
is really interesting. Because I've been able to trigger lucid dreams by practicing. It's like a very known way in how you can learn to become aware. But every time I like woke up in the dream, I got so excited that the whole thing would fall apart.
mm.
So to me, it's really cool to have a technology. And Garrett and I have debated on this. Like, should you be using technology to
Let me guess.
access this?
He's opposed to it.
He's opposed to it. Yeah.
Knew it. But I don't mean that necessarily critically. It's just like I know he has cultivated such a practice in his own life of like enabling lucid dreams. I'm sure it feels like this cheating shortcut almost. Man, from my view, I'm say let's full steam ahead. I mean, like I don't know what downsides are to this, but man, it's lucid, like, okay, yeah, you can go on Reddit lucid dreaming and really like train the skill up over years, but to have that on demand is so lucid dreaming is one of those things that seems too good to be true. I think I've experienced it about twice in my life. It was pretty remarkable when I did, but it's just a whole new day, man. I took some notes on their video. They had all these great phrases, explore states of we want to explore state spaces of human consciousness. Like that's such a great phrase. And like that's what to me this lucid dreaming does. Like why spend months or years trying to like do it yourself if you can take this thing, if it is harmless and it doesn't have these negative side effects. It seems like so obvious why you'd want to try it, you know.
I
Yeah.
can understand the case against it. And Venkatesh Rao wrote about this. And it was an article like slow intelligence or slow time and oozy intelligence, but there's value in the very slow and tedious practice in learning to write and learning how to draw by hand and cursive and in lucid dreaming too. And you learn things in that process. And so when it comes to lucid dreaming, the debate I'd like to have is most of the value in the process of learning how to do it, or is it when you're actually in the dream engaging with your subconscious? Like that also feels like a very hard, slow practice that you can really grow from. Whereas the path to get there actually just feels like friction that we all wish weren't there, you know?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think, I mean, first of all, doing it, it's very, I want to read the Venkatesh piece, but it's a very like, obviously, I think with any of these things, there's going to be the more rewarding way to do it the proper way. I mean, obviously me in language learning, right? Like I see a video of somebody using HeyGen just to like speak Chinese. On some level that would bother me at times. That came out in September and there's a little bit like, okay, how do I think about this? But no, I just really, really, really enjoy the process of mastering it myself. It's my favorite thing to do. So that's number one. Number two, on the surface, oh, they can speak it just like me. In reality, go over to China, with a HeyGen and your laptop. Good luck, right? Like it's now maybe eventually when you get real time and all that, you can get better, but it will never. Who knows? 100 years, 200 years, but for any foreseeable future, it will just not be equal. And maybe there's fewer returns to learning languages in the broadest sense, but for how I want to apply it, it's still so advantageous to learn it. And I happen to really enjoy it. I think you'd say the same for writing, but the human mind, our time is limited. There's only so many things I can go deep on. By choosing to go deep on Chinese, I suppose I could also do lucid dreaming, but then my time just gets squeezed out, right? Like there's only, I want to go deep on writing and Chinese. I might not have time to sift through hours of, the subreddit but if I can get 80% of the benefit with this band, I want to do that because otherwise that whole experience is walled off to me. And so I'm willing to take a slightly less perfect version of it, slightly less rewarding, because otherwise I'd have nothing in that domain. And by the way, same for people who aren't going to study languages. Studying language is an insane thing to do. And so if you haven't done that and you want to communicate with people on another continent, use HeyGen. Like for sure, go use it. It's never going to be as rich as my experience, but we can only have so many domains where we go deep in anyway. So this is just this thing that unlocks all these other doors at an 80% rate. Like let's do it, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's like out of the 20 skills, you can pick one, maybe two to do totally in full.
Yeah.
And maybe if you unlock 18 other skills at 80%, maybe those even feed back into your core game of mastery. Like by me automating the process to get in lucid dreams, how might that affect my writing, which I'm working really hard on.
Completely agree. Right. It just opens you up to all this whole new suite of experiences. Um, the dreaming one in particular, I don't know, maybe it's because I haven't put in the work to like become a lucid dreamer, but like I think there's something inherently valuable about learning to write, inherently valuable at learning to speak a language. Look, the lucid dreamers who are really into it would disagree with me, I'm sure, but like you were saying, I think so much more of the benefit comes from the destination and not the journey on this one, right? Like I don't even know how people work on their lucid dreaming. I think they take journals and notes and stuff, but gosh, I think the real juice to be squeezed to me is once you're actually doing the thing. Like it's not some time-honored tradition of like learning to lucid dream the way it is. Like what are the ancillary benefits? Like learning to write, you're learning to think better, communicate better, have more
Right. That's
flow
interesting.
state focus. Obviously, I feel the same for language learning. It improves my brain in all these ways. What would the lucid dreaming case be? Like, oh, it makes me more introspective or something. But I my biased view is that the ones that we're pursuing deeply have way more inherently intrinsically valuable byproducts than learning to lucid dream.
Right, right. That's a great point. Yeah, there's um one of the main ways to learn how to lucid dream is to throughout the day do reality checks, which is basically asking yourself, am I dreaming? If you
Mm,
think about it, it's actually a pretty paranoid state of mind. Like you have to constantly be questioning your reality. Well, I mean, maybe that's not paranoid, but maybe it speaks to the true transient nature of our reality, and that's a good psychological space to be in. It's hard to
yeah,
say,
it might be.
but
I'm not saying there's zero, byproducts or zero positive benefits. I'm not familiar with them, and I'm sure Lucid Dreamer would disagree. But yeah, it's at some point you just have to pick your battles, right? Like there's just an infinite. This is that 4,000 Weeks book makes this point. Like you're not going to do or experience or visit most things or places or whatever like
yeah,
most activity. Like it's just the hand we're dealt with the human condition. Like 99.999% of everything we will never do, never learn, never experience. And so you could sit around and think about that all the time, or like dive really deep on the ones that you love. And then by the way, here comes this thing that makes all these other ones available 80%. And yeah, I think
yeah,
it's cool. But yeah, anyways, that's my
yeah.
thought.
And yeah, I think is like taking the shortcut isn't a bad thing
Mhm.
as long as you're still aware of the, I don't know how to put it, like the ethical questions that are there. Like if you just thrust yourself in this instant ability to be, in your unchained imagination, how are people going to use that?
Yeah.
Typically, like all of a sudden now, like, how might society change if everybody spent every single night 3 hours in an unchained fantasy? You know what I mean? Would it affect birth rates? Would it affect marriages? Would it affect our job? You know what I mean? Like, who knows what the second order consequences are of like a
Yeah.
very simple thing?
That's a very interesting way to think about it. Yeah, they might be tremendous, but
Yeah, we could all become enlightened beings. Who knows?
yeah, I say let's go find out. Like it doesn't seem to have these horrible now. And by the way, you use a technology. Man, I was reading one book about sort of about science in the 20th century, and the people like Marie Curie discovered radiation, and then this other scientist was working with her, and a few of them died because like they didn't realize radiation had these horrible side effects to expose yourself to radiation. You end up dying, and that's an extreme example, but like we forge into these new possibility spaces, and then you discover that it's kind of rough at the edges, or it's kind of has some drawbacks, and then you scale back down. Now I don't think
Yep.
lucid is
Yep.
as dangerous as radiation, but let's plunge ahead and then correct as needed. Now
Yeah.
you did an interesting point about just in this piece that you wrote on the typewriter, right? Plunging into our dreams and this comparison to plunging into our digital worlds, and I don't know, you just spoke very movingly in this piece about what it just what this might feel like. And there's all these questions you leave, what degree should we leave our plane of our Cartesian earth? Can transcendence be escapism? Just all the benefits and drawbacks of plunging into this stuff. I don't know if you want to talk about that a bit, but it's quite interesting to hear you riff on those things.
Yeah. It almost reminds me of like the next tier of well, I guess there's like Brave New World, where it's like everyone's immersed in infinite entertainment. And we've kind of seen that already with media.
Yeah.
This is kind of the next step forward. And I'm not even saying it's good or bad. When it comes to like simulation theory, it's almost always bad. Like it's the Matrix model where
Mm.
it's like, hey, everyone's living in a perfect fantasy and their bodies are like a battery cell for some tyrant machine, you know? But I guess I'm just wondering, like, imagine if through virtual reality devices, through these lucid dreaming machines, we could actually find spiritual truths. We can connect with people. We can do all these things that we define as good, but there's some sort of trade-off where we're not like living within our constraints,
Right,
you
right,
know?
right.
Like, is there anything, imagine you're just at a job that you hate. I mean, it's effectively a drug in a way, where
Mhm.
it's like there's that time hole example where it's like, oh, I have 10 minutes, let me just take like a 3 week vacation somewhere, and like
Where you
you can
said
just
it
do
for 10
that,
years, yeah.
and it makes every day a little bit more bearable because you've had just an amazing um like time becomes totally elastic, and
Yep,
you're
yep.
not really bound to this world anymore, and it just sounds amazing, and there has to be, I mean, there's obviously going to be um abuses of it, you know.
Big time abuses, but also, yeah, the default is to assume that it's, yeah, this hellscape, like, Matrix type thing you're saying. Uh, but yeah, I think, I mean, I think there's a lot of great possibilities for it too. What's coming to mind for me is that okay, take like how work has changed. Like we always use that photo and rite of passage of like the 1980s office with the stuffy black and white, ties. It looks ridiculous. Like, and now some of work is still like that, but so much of work is more individually molded and shaped around your unique abilities, right? Solopreneur and gig work, even, and like, there's just mass individuation of work. And so what if the same thing were to happen with entertainment? I mean, it sort of already is, right? Like okay, yeah, before there's just network television, then cable, and now like there's all these different shows on Netflix that you can find that suit you, and then YouTube, you can find the stuff that uniquely suits you. But what if entertainment went even beyond, like, oh, you can just watch things on a screen that more suit you, but it actually, the locus of entertainment actually moves internal, if this makes sense. And
Yeah,
so the things, you know, sitting and watching a screen with a video that's uniquely catered to you via the algorithm will seem really boring compared to like exploring your unique inner landscape in this incredibly, impossibly like rich way. Now that might lead to total atomization and fragmentation and people being disconnected from each other. But isn't that an amazing thing to picture, that, right? Like something so infinitely entertaining if it's exploring your own subconscious through lucid dreaming or the VR or some
yeah,
combination of them. But it's pretty interesting to me.
yeah. And the question is, when you get something that good, do you retain the ability to balance all the different forms of meaning in your life, or do you become addicted to something that is just so potent, you know? Um,
But see, even what you just said is still, there's still a negative framing there. And I'm not like, I'm just saying like, I default towards the negative with all this stuff, but like, I'm trying to really think big and like, it's always interesting to say like, what about the things that seem normal now, what will seem weird or bad or antiquated in the future? And so, we could say, okay, we're going to spend some more time in our subconscious, but how do we balance that with all these other things in life? But think about how different, like, imagine trying to explain YouTube to, the proverbial guy in like 1800s America. What was entertainment to them was like playing the fiddle and reading a good book. And maybe, if you're lucky, you're a kid, you get a game of hopscotch. Like there was so vastly different than what's available today. So what is the equivalent, like, vast difference in the future? I do think it has to do something with like moving within the subconscious and like like think of it like a game of jacks or hopscotch. People still do that, by the way, occasionally, kind of for kicks. And it's kind of this old, but
yeah,
compare like a game of jacks. This is my grandmother even this past century found entertaining to like an 8-year-old being plugged into like the Mr. Beast YouTube world. There's so many
yeah.
dimensions in
Or
which
like Fortnite and VR. Yeah,
Fortnite in VR. And so, do you see what I'm saying? And so, what's the equivalent move beyond the stuff we have now? I think it has to do with this custom tailored stuff in your own
yeah.
subconscious. Does that make sense? Like, I don't know what it looks like precisely, but that feels like there's something there to me. Yeah.
I like that. Yeah, yeah. Like, what is it? It's like a prompt. Like, what is an inconceivable form of humor, of future entertainment?
Humor, entertainment, like,
Yeah,
I think of like these worlds I had as a kid, imaginary worlds I play, have these games. I had these like recurring games I would come back to. One, I had these cars, and I imagined these little Hot Wheel cars were like these spaceships that would battle in space. I had one where this little alien figure. I had this whole world in my mind of like these aliens that had come to Earth and had to fight against ants of all things. I don't know. I just had all these like fantasy worlds in my head, and they're very crude and like childish. And they were just in my imagination, but like imagine those things coming to life at scale for like all adults. It sounds weird. It's not necessarily like talking about this stuff
Yeah,
sound a bit weird, but I'm like
but
those were so entertaining as a kid. There was like there's nothing better than escaping into my own little imaginary world. But there
it's the
wasn't even
imagination.
yeah, dude. Imagination is the key
The
word here.
words they met, and dude, this is Terrence McKenna's whole thing. He thinks that society, history is dissolving, and the human species is just turning into pure light of the imagination.
Jeez, that's something. That see now we're talking. That's really
Yeah.
something. It's I would call it. Could we call it instrumentalized imagination? It's like my imagination as a kid. I mean, it's very pure and it's very sweet to like think of those times, and it was very pure. I would just put my brain power to use. You know, now I imagine all the different ways my life could have gone or should go in the future. Like a lot of that imaginative ability is deployed in sort of ways that make me unhappy, like as beautiful as when I was a 8-year-old or something, but. I don't know. I'm coming to terms like this term is instrumentalized imagination. You can, this imaginative ability we all have, you can actually give form and give visual form and three-dimensional form to that, and then have this whole world
You're
that
actually in it and it's
explore.
stable, stabilized too.
Totally.
Yeah.
And it's so easy to be like, oh, well, that'll make us like less likely to go touch grass. It's the default move is towards why is this robbed from the current things we value? If you told a
Yeah.
18-year-old farmer about YouTube, you'd say, well, what about milking the cows and washing the hogs? And the
Right.
landscapes become unrecognizable. And it's not inherently good or bad. It's just different. There's a lot of things we'd lose if we spent way more time in these rich solo imaginary worlds. And yet, God, the things we gain are probably outweigh. It's hard to say, but
The even weirder thing is we might not even have to sacrifice that because your escape into the imagination might be, if you think about the lucid dreaming thing, you're tapping into hours that are otherwise just dark,
yes,
right?
yes, yeah,
And if you
yeah.
think of like this idea of time becoming elastic means that like we could just both say, hey, hold on for like 5 seconds, and then we can both go and like learn a song on piano for 2 hours and come like it enters this weird post-constraint world. Like there's the
Yeah.
potential of entering a post-constraint world.
Yeah,
Um, and I think what that means is, and this is where I said that I think we're approaching a kind of spiritual rift because like beyond entertainment and like productivity, throughout the whole arc of history, there have been like certain core things about what it means to be a human.
mm,
And by the mid or end of this century, it could come to a point where like death is optional,
mm.
time is completely elastic. You can shard and create 15 versions of yourself. Um,
Man.
you know what I mean? Like,
No, I
and there
do.
might just be some people who are so skeeved that technology is changing the nature of what we've always been, you know?
Yeah. Well, this is the Uzification point from Venkatesh. It's like the there's always like things that seem inherently valuable, and then technology changes those things. Now, most of the time, the generations die out, and there's been so many generations between the farmer in 1800 versus today that we're less jarred by YouTube because those values of like feeding the hogs and milking the cows, most of us don't have those values because that's just not a part of our lives anymore.
Right.
But the always interesting thing is all the stuff you're describing, if this century that's happening within a lifetime where the things we valued in the 90s or 2000s versus then would be so vastly different. A lot of people may not be able to cope with it or might not be able to accept it. But dude, the thing that's come to mind for me, I always talk about like this outward tug or the inward turn, and all this entertainment like pulls you outside of yourself. It's like, no, you're just like a
Mm.
regular folk. You're not that special. Go watch Jennifer Garner and Tom Cruise because they're these chosen anointed saints. It's almost like back in the day when only a certain number of people could like read and write and everybody else was just like the peasants to go work the fields. It's like nowadays with
Huh.
entertainment, like I live here in Hollywood. It's like there's this chosen class that gets all the glory and everybody else is just these like sort of just regular folk rubes who have to just watch them. And obviously the creator economy is a step towards more people sharing their unique thing inside their head. But my first article in Rite of Passage was Your Infinity Machine, and it was about how a deck of cards has 10 to 67 possibilities. Well, imagine what you can do with 100 billion neurons inside your brain. And most of us take those 100 billion neurons and shut them up and stare at a screen versus go exploring that rich inner landscape and see what you find. And like, there's got to be some way too for like, you can go explore your own inner world and then express that outward. And then you can,
Yeah.
I mean, then you get a BCI and stuff and who knows, but like, even before that, like you explore your own inner landscape and you go write about it, you go create about it, and then interact with others. It's like, of course you want to unleash this latent dormant potential inside all these minds through exploration of your imagination. Like, of course you want to get all those hours back every day to lucid dream and then go share what you find with the world. Like it seems self-evident. I mean, you can always find the drawbacks, but the benefits are so, they're thrilling if you really think
Yeah,
about it.
it's two archetypes. It's the psychedelic artist versus the heroin junkie. They're both states
Nice.
of bliss, but one is exploring a landscape
Nice.
with the bias saying, "Hey, I need to capture something and bring it back to my tribe."
Yeah.
Whereas
That's
the
good.
heroin junkie is experiencing pure bliss for the sake of it and just needs more of it, and it's kind of a state of consumption versus a state of creation,
And it's destructive and
and
it's
it's destructive
and it's
versus being
addictive.
generative. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know why I'm thinking of this, but Visa tweeted this week. He's like, devotion versus obsession. I like to use the word obsession a lot, but he's like, devotion is sort of a more beautiful framing of obsessions. I don't know, somehow there's a connection there of like, well, whatever. It's like two very similar things. They're both blissed out states, heroin versus psychedelic creation, but one is restrictive and it kind of goes down and the other kind of goes up. And
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
just thinking of that.
I've had a
Um,
similar reaction to the word obsession recently.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I've always seen it very positively, but I'm forgetting now what exactly he said, but it was something about like obsession constricts or obsession clings and devotion like holds tenderly or something like that. And I've
Mm, makes
last few
sense.
days said to people like, oh, I'm very devoted to studying Chinese. I used to say I'm very obsessed, and I am obsessed, but obsessed, I think no matter what, will always have some negative connotation to me. Whereas devotion is sort of a beautiful word. It's like, I'm just, it's like there's this free, but serious commitment in that word. I
Yeah,
don't know.
I think obsession to me is it's about the ego, where it's like the mind needs to be satiated, where devotion speaks to a higher power, where you're kind of through a commitment to trusting something and working at it, you kind of ascend, you know?
You see how I loosely associate that with like, there's something so like, it's like I'm picturing like twisting inward of the heroin. Like you're just you recede over time because the heroin. So I've been told. I don't know from firsthand experience. Becomes an addiction. Becomes like that. Becomes the only thing in your world. Your whole world like crumple. It's like if it's like a styrofoam cup going deeper and deeper into the ocean, and like the water pressure like crumples it in this little ball. Versus the opposite is it like expand like devotion or the psychedelic creativity, like expanding outward in this like light, like glorious, it's dark crumpling versus like this light,
Yeah.
bright, illuminative expansion is how I'm seeing it. Yeah. Yeah. Man. I would love to talk about this for another hour. I am playing tennis in 18 minutes. So I gotta jump, man. But let's do this again soon. And so so much more to talk about on these topics. So yeah.
Yeah. Dude, I feel like 2024 will be a big year. So every 2 weeks, there's going to be something like today, like some new Morpheus that comes
Of
out.
course. That's all we'll keep doing this. So good
Yeah.
stuff, man. All right. Till next time. Great talk.
Talk soon. Bye.